Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of 30-Minute Thursdays, otherwise known as 30 Mint, where I bring you my weekly dose of fresh ideas and insights that are helping me to perform at my best. From my weekly recovery hacks, training philosophies, and analyzed guest insights, I will come prepared each week in hopes that you can apply these snippets to your everyday life. Now let's get to the show. If you like it, please like and subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes. And for the true fans, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. Today, I will be covering one of my favorite pieces of training equipment, especially with its applications to grappling and jiu-jitsu, kettlebells. In this episode, you can expect to learn how their unique structure is ideal for grappling, 4 main performance outcomes that you can expect from using kettlebells, the Turkish getup for grappling stability, brand recommendations, and this is an important part, my 2 favorite moves for jiu-jitsu. I hope you enjoy the episode. So let me say a brief principle about specificity. When you look on social media, it is very common that you're going to find someone that says, do this exercise for this sport. And what they'll usually do is they show you some sort of exercise that looks very similar to the sport that you're going to do or the one that you're training, which is why you find their content. But in actuality, does it really actually make you better at the sport? A good example of this would be doing sled pulls with jiu-jitsu sleeves tied around the sled so that it builds your grip strength for jiu-jitsu. Or doing things this is a silly example, but clicking into your ski boots, standing in your skis, and then doing things with a medicine ball because in reality, you're going to be in your ski boots and on your skis when you're skiing. But the truth about training is that specificity doesn't always produce performance outcomes. And here's one of the reasons why kettlebells are very useful in producing performance outcomes for jiu-jitsu. If we think about jiu-jitsu as a sport, or grappling, wrestling, for example, you're going to be moving unexpectedly through multiple planes of motion with someone else who you can't predict what they're going to do. And as a result of that unpredictability, you're going to end up in positions that you didn't expect to be in by force, not by will. Someone will push you, they'll pull you, they'll drag your arm, they'll trip your leg. And so you end up in these positions that you're not used to being in. One of the most valuable parts of kettlebells is they are versatile across multiple planes of motion. A barbell is fixed to the front of your body or the back of your body, unless it's attached to a landmine, in which case you can start to rotate it. But if you think about the big power generating movements with a barbell, the power clean and the jerk, they are all fixed in front of your body because the barbell cannot pass through you. So as a result, all the power that you build in these positions is going to be built in that frontal plane. When you are able to use a kettlebell, you can take some of that power and move it into rotation, move it into different planes of motion, and then combine movements that otherwise wouldn't be as easy to combine and do them with a kettlebell in ways that you might actually feel yourself working in the sport. The reason that I said the example at the beginning about specificity is because it almost sounds like I'm describing that. And that's an important part to understand because a key differentiating factor of this is having useful programming behind your kettlebell training so that you actually are building strength and you actually are building endurance, anaerobic capacity, and you're building integrity in the joints that you're using. So it's very important to select movements in a programmed structure that are actually going to produce the desired performance outcome that you're using the kettlebell for. Let's break down a couple of the things that make the kettlebell unique compared to, say, a dumbbell. One of the most important things, and I think this is very important for grappling, is that when you load a kettlebell on your arm, if you're watching the video online right now, you'll see me do this. If you're on Spotify, you can also watch the video because it's on there. You might not know that. If you look at my hand right now, many people hold a kettlebell in this position with a cocked wrist. When you're holding a kettlebell for presses, when you're receiving them in the clean position or the rack position, and you're taking them from the floor up towards your body, you need to hold this flexed wrist position. it's going to create a little bit of painful sensation on the back of the forearm in the beginning as you build a callus. But this position is where all solid kettlebell movements come from. When you catch a snatch with a kettlebell, this position is what you want your wrist in, because a broken wrist will lead to breaking down the chain at your elbow and then into your shoulder joint. So having a good grip and a good alignment from your pinky all the way down through your elbow creates a very firm structure here to support the kettlebell, whether it's going up overhead, whether you're catching it overhead in position from a snatch, or whether you're cleaning it and catching it at your shoulder. This unique position where the loading is on the back side of the wrist forces these muscles on the front of the wrist to engage in order to maintain the position. You can see this very easily by, if I allow my wrist to go into flexion, if I allow my wrist to go into extension like this, these muscles on the front, they're getting longer. As I contract them, I pull the wrist into this more upright position. The reason that this is so useful for grappling sports is because many people in the gi have trouble finishing movements because they lack strength in their wrist. They cannot get that wrist flexion. By building this isometric strength in the wrist, you're going to be able to finish more submissions and use the strength in your wrist, not just talk about using it. The second thing is that this position of loading behind the hand when overhead is going to tax the muscles on the backside of the shoulder, the traps, rear deltoids, and down into the lat, this whole posterior chain of your body. When you press a dumbbell overhead, if you rotate it, it actually sits evenly on either side of your hand. And so if it's above you, it's in line with the middle of your body. A kettlebell sits with all that positioning back. I mean, if you hold a 24-kilo kettlebell over your head in the correct wrist position, it is a lot of work for your posterior deltoids and your shoulder muscles to keep your shoulder in the right place and cement that stability. Why does this matter for grappling? Because how many people do you know who have a shoulder injury from training? I can name off my hand 3 people that I know personally who are dealing with shoulder injury. Is that to say that kettlebells will fix all that? No, not at all. But what it will do is help build integrity into one of the body's most complex joints, the shoulder. It does every single action. It's just like the hip. So if you put good structure into the available ranges of motion that you have, or even better, set out to improve the range of motion that you have, then create strength in the new ranges, kettlebells are fantastic for this. A great exercise to do this, which I'll get to in a little bit here, is arm bars from your back. You can look this up on YouTube. I'll put a link in the notes actually for what kettlebell arm bars are. It's a great way to add stability and mobility to the shoulder joint using a kettlebell and its specific loading to help that joint come on board. And that's very important when you consider injury risk reduction and the long-term health of yourself on the mats. The other thing that I love about the kettlebell, and this is best done with a bell, but not unique to the kettlebell, is kettlebell swings. It's one of the most foundational movements. It is the perfect exercise to build hip endurance from flexion into extension. So that's the same thing as standing up out of a squat, jumping off the ground. That repeated action of going from bent at your hips to standing is something that you are going to do in jiu-jitsu constantly. That's guard retention. That's fending people off from passing your guard. It's this constant relationship of your knees close to your chest and going further away, right? That's hip flexion, hip extension. Kettlebell swings are blending forearm strength and endurance. That's your ability to hold the weight of the kettlebell, combined with hip endurance and strength, your hip's ability to repeatedly propel the bell forward, and then core stability, your ability to lock your trunk so that the bell doesn't go flying forward when you do the exercise. And then 4, and this is so important, it gives you the opportunity to learn about proper breathing and bracing. One of the very first things that you're going to do if you train with kettlebells and you work with someone who is actually knowledgeable with them is you're going to learn about proper breathing and bracing, because you're throwing a ton of weight in front of your body. If you expect that it's just going to stop and you don't know how to engage your core muscles, use a snake breath, same thing you see in boxing, you're going to have a really hard time engaging your core muscles on command to prevent this bell from going forward and getting your back muscles involved. So you'll see when people use kettlebells, whether it's doing a press, they'll use this specific breath. It's a quick inhale, like you're smelling something, and then it's a breath sharply through the teeth. If you watch a boxer box, they do the same thing. That's on purpose. It's so that in the extension of the jab or the hook or the uppercut, that breath causes a contraction in your diaphragm. And in the event that you get countered, you have tension in your stomach. People that are inhaling as they're punching that get countered get dropped. Kettlebells teach this behavior because you have so many opportunities over and over and over to repeat that explosive quick inhale, quick stabilizing exhale. Quick inhale, explosive stabilizing exhale. That was my first introduction to truly understanding that breath had a big impact in how I was going to perform in the gym. So learning how to stabilize on command, learning how to utilize your breath to create stability, using your breath to create explosiveness, kettlebells will teach this and ingrain it if you put the effort into learning how to properly do them. Kettlebell swings are fantastic for jiu-jitsu. You can regulate the weight as much as you want, go as heavy as you want, provided you have good stability, keep it light and work on endurance. You can also do AMRAPs, EMOMs, time sets, explosive repeats. There's so many things that you can do with a kettlebell. It's extremely versatile, and it's one piece of equipment. You can probably find one at any gym in the world, and it gives you the opportunity to work this whole spectrum of different exercises with desired outcomes. So let's move specifically to that. Outcomes. What can you expect to get by working with kettlebells, and why should we give a shit if we are jiu-jitsu practitioners or grapplers? First, grip. What is one of the most important things in grappling? Your grips. Whether you're using monkey grips and no-gi, whether you're using collar, sleeve, lapel grips or pant legs in your gi training, your grip endurance, which is a product of your flexors and their relationship with your extensors, right? I did an episode with Dan Strauss, probably one of the kings of grip. You can check that out in the episodes. We went in deep detail on grip training specific for jiu-jitsu. Your flexors and your extensors are the two muscles on the front and the back side of your arm, your forearm, right? So your relationship to keep those muscles going without fatigue is really important in jiu-jitsu. Good practitioners have good grips for both gi and no gi. A kettlebell is going to do that simply by the fact that you cannot do an exercise with a kettlebell unless you grip it. And the heavier it gets, the more that you have to engage that grip. Pavel Tsatsouline, one of the grandfathers of kettlebell training, did this fantastic exercise where he said, and you can do this right now if you're listening, make a fist as tight as you can. Now add 10% to that. And now squeeze your hand like you're trying to turn it to sand. What you just did there in doing that exercise is you did what you thought was 100%, which it definitely wasn't. You then added more, which was increasing your grip. And then you even added more to that at the very end. That shows a range in grip engagement. Kettlebells utilize this because if you're constantly using that turn to sand grip, your arms are going to blow out. If you're using something in the middle where you're tight and engaged and you're getting your arm muscles to engage, your lats, your traps, everything tight on the body as the kettlebell goes away from you, whether it's a swing, a clean, a snatch, a double clean, that management of grip engagement is a very useful tool when you're building endurance, because if every time you grab the lapel, you grabbed it as tight as you possibly could, you would have horrible grip endurance. So like in jiu-jitsu, when you're learning this regulation of how hard you should squeeze and when you should squeeze, kettlebells are going to teach you this in a controlled setting where you're predicting what's going on. So they're going to build great grip endurance, grip strength, tough hands, right? The tighter your grip, the tighter your fists, the harder you punch. They're a great tool for building anaerobic capacity. This is your ability to maintain high heart rates in exercise. So your body's running primarily on carbohydrates for energy. You can tune in this coming Tuesday for an epic episode with the Fight Dietitian. We go into deep length on this. I'm so stoked for that episode to come out, so I'll leave some of the scientific stuff for that. But essentially, when you're in an anaerobic state, your body is in an energy pathway where it's utilizing carbohydrates for energy. It has distanced itself from fat metabolism, and this is where your heart rate is pinning. You're going as hard as you can. These are your scrambles. These are your stand-up days, your takedowns. Kettlebells work very well at ramping your heart rate up quickly and giving you the opportunity to work with them there. It's not unique to kettlebells. You could do this on an airdyne bike. You could do this with battle ropes. But the fact that they move dynamically with you while you're doing it is really useful for sport. So great for building anaerobic capacity. You just have to control your intensity and be able to push yourself hard enough. So there are some prerequisites for that. And I recommend that you invest a little bit of time into understanding your specific heart rate zones and how you can train at them. The next thing, and this is something that I originally learned in Olympic weightlifting, but is super valuable. There's this idea in Olympic weightlifting called force attenuation, which essentially means your body's ability to attenuate, to receive force. In movements like a power clean, a clean and a jerk, there's this moment where the bar and the athlete are disconnected from their trunk. So they have their hands around the bar, but they're repositioning to catch the barbell on their shoulder. When that weight, you think about some of the world records that have been set where there's over 500 pounds being cleaned into this position from the floor. When that weight lands on the body, that ability to attenuate that force, the force of the barbell, is a learned skill. It's something that builds over time with training programs. Different example of this that doesn't really involve that same impact force would be if you've ever tried to front squat with a barbell. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. Those first couple times front squatting with that barbell are really uncomfortable. It doesn't sit in the groove of your collarbone. Maybe your wrists don't like being in the right spot. But over time, you start to be able to unrack quite a bit of weight. Your body is building an ability to receive the weight against it. Why the hell does this matter for grappling? Because that's all you do the whole time that you train. Someone is shooting on you, you're sprawling. Someone is grabbing the back of your head and trying to snap you down into a guillotine, you're trying to posture up and get away from it. Somebody is trying to pass your guard, you're trying to get your knees close to your chest. It's this initial contact, when they grab you, when they charge you, when they drop to a leg and try to get the single. Those moments of contact, your inability to attenuate that force is going to result most likely in you falling over. So when you train with kettlebells and you do things like double cleans or single arm cleans, that moment when the bell contacts your body, it's helping you build this ability of resistance. So if you start with doing kettlebell work at 12 kilos and you work yourself all the way up to doing double cleans with 24s, that's double the weight. If you can do that for time and reps and build ability and strength, that's a significant improvement in your ability to receive loading. And that in a sport like jiu-jitsu or in grappling is invaluable, especially because it's going to happen at different places unexpectedly. Next, we'll move to the Turkish get-up. I want to touch on this real quick because it's extremely valuable for grappling. It is essentially the bread and butter of kettlebell movements. You've probably seen someone do it before. Their arms up in the air, they bridge up on one leg, one heel, and their hand. You actually see this movement happen constantly in jiu-jitsu. A tactical stand-up, like a stand-in base, is essentially a fraction of a Turkish get-up. It's keeping one hand extended, bridging up on your hips, sweeping your leg through, standing up, backing away, getting your hands up to deal with the opponent. A Turkish get-up puts you under stress, under loading with that unique kettlebell positioning on the backside of your hand and gets you to go into hip extension. And as a result of getting all the way up to standing and all the way back down, every joint in your body goes through every action under stress. So for someone who lacks trunk stability in a side flex position, this is a great exercise because it gives you the opportunity to learn how to do it if you train it properly. You can take freeze frames of people training jiu-jitsu and you can marry it with people doing Turkish get-ups. I mean, this exercise shows up all the time, and proficiency within it will definitely lead to new stability across different planes of motion in the sport, all while training your shoulder mobility through different ranges, which, as I've said on other episodes with personal trainers and why I can't even think of this, physical therapists. Wow. With physical therapists, your ability to build strength, transition that strength into athletic capabilities, that will help reduce the risk of injury on the mats, period. So investing in one kettlebell and learning how to properly do a Turkish get-up with good stability will definitely take your core stability, your trunk stability, your hip extension, and your grip strength and move it into a position where you can utilize it on the mats. The Turkish get-up is, however, a very slow exercise, and it's a good one to do with control because there's so many moving parts. But if you can unload it and start to flow a little bit through that pattern, that's when you'll really start to see the transition. All right, real quick, couple minutes, let's talk about brand recommendations. I'm a massive fan, and none of this is paid. I wish it were. This is just my opinion. I'm a massive fan of everything that Rogue makes, Rogue International. They're out of Ohio. In my eyes, they're the creme de la creme of fitness equipment. I have a large majority of the stuff that I have in my gym, which I think I'll do a walkthrough of someday for you guys, is Rogue equipment. It is bomb-proof. And having swung a lot of kettlebells, pressed a lot of kettlebells, the weight distribution, the shape, the handle size, which can be obnoxious sometimes, and how the handles accumulate chalk, because you do use chalk with a lot of kettlebell movements. It doesn't tear up your hands, it doesn't get cakey, and it doesn't not hold chalk. So some other brands, they're like rubber handles or they're metal handles and they just chew up your hands. These Rogue kettlebells, they're the tits. In addition to that, Perform Better makes amazing equipment at a fraction of the cost. So if you're looking to budget cut a little bit, Perform Better is great. They're a wholesaler. I've used them for a lot of equipment, usually bands and things like that. I'll get on performbetter.com. Kettlebell Kings is a kettlebell specific brand. They make good stuff, but honestly, for the cost, I would just go with Rogue at that point. And then Sorinex. Sorinex is another brand, kind of like Rogue. They do big gym build-outs for college campuses, different universities, stuff like that. I think Joe Rogan's gym is built by Sorinex. So they make really high-end equipment. They also do a ton of barbells, kettlebells, dumbbells, stuff like that. But I will say, if you're going to get kettlebells, they last forever. You're not going to replace them, so just get the good ones. Get ones that fit in your hand nice, that have good handles, that have good welding, and good weight distribution. You don't want them filled with weight where you can feel it going around. You don't want them rubber on the outside. Just straight up, bomb-proof iron kettlebells with Rogue. All right, last 7 minutes. We're cruising. I'm going to talk about two of my favorite kettlebell exercises, ones that have still, 6 years later, having started jiu-jitsu, stay in my program, things that I like to do. I like to have different intensities with these two exercises, and I like to utilize them when I travel. You can grab a kettlebell anywhere, and these are two exercises that you can ramp the heart rate up with. You can get some great grip work going. You can get a lot of good hip extension work, good core work, and you can turn these two exercises into a full-blown training session. So, number one, kettlebell double swings. That's two bells, also double cleans. You can do these together or kind of split between the two. So you do one clean, one double swing. The reason I like doing that is because one primes the movement pattern for the other. So double clean is two individually moving kettlebells, good grip on both of them. You hike them back, explode your hips, and clean them up into the rack position. You get a little bit of that force attenuation because it's crashing into you. You're stabilizing upon impact. It gives you the opportunity to work that wrist position and how you rack the kettlebell, knuckle to knuckle, elbow straight line down to the pinky. And it teaches you how to receive kettlebells, because if you really want to get dynamic with the movements, learning how to take them from the floor up to the shoulder safely, despite the weight, so it could be super heavy or it could be light, that ability is instrumental in linking exercises together. So not only is it an extremely foundational movement, but it is a movement that will help you build that anaerobic capacity, provided you choose the right time frames and work to rest ratios. It'll give you that opportunity to get some force attenuation work, and it will set you up to then go into presses, cleans, jerks, everything of the like. So super useful. Your grip will get worked, your hips will get worked, and you will feel better on the mats if you start utilizing properly executed kettlebell double cleans. Next, single arm farmer's carry. And the reason that I like single arm farmer's carry versus double farmer's carry, which you'll see a lot, that's kind of like a wheelbarrow walk or holding weights at your side. The single arm loads your body on one side. If you stand in front of a mirror with no shirt on and you lean down and you pick up a heavy weight and stand up and look at your trunk, you will see this shift happen in your abdomen where all your abdominal muscles load up on the other side. This asymmetry always happens when we assume loading on one side of the body. But doing farmer's carry single arm give you the opportunity, again, provided you execute them properly, to have that happen but not affect your stability. So when you're doing these, you want to see level hips despite the loading. You want to see level shoulders despite the loading. I like to put one hand out to the side, the other hand holding the kettlebell, just so I can watch my shoulders, watch my trunk, watch my abdomen, watch my pelvis. And I like to do a heel-toe walk. So that's going to be one foot directly in front of the other, almost like I'm on a tightrope or like a balance beam, and I walk like that. The foot position gives you another added degree of instability. The hand position gives the loading on one side. The single arm hold gives a ton of grip work if you do this for a long time. Sometimes I'll go, the length of my driveway is about 1.5 minutes down and back. So I'll go half the distance holding it on one side, half the distance holding it on the other. This is a fantastic exercise for building core stability, anti-rotational strength, anti-gravitational strength, anti-flexion and extension, for amazing functions of the core, plus grip strength. And you can do it for time. So you can take your grip from a point where you know it runs out and build it up over time. That will definitely transition to your time on the mats, your time wrestling, and the stronger your grip, the harder your punch, as they say. So thank you for sticking through with me to the end here. Another 30-minute Thursdays. I really hope that this stuff is valuable for you. This was this episode was a listener suggestion. So please, if you're here with me right now, feel free to reach out to me if there's things that you have questions about in your training, if related to or unrelated to jiu-jitsu. I would love to cover those topics in the 30-minute Thursdays, give you some insights based on my experience as a personal trainer, a coach, and someone who's fallen in love with this sport for the past 6 years. So again, if you're still here, thank you so much. Please take 30 seconds. Leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. It helps so much. These ratings position the show to new people that don't know about it in the discovered functions on Spotify. So boosting those ratings really help position the show. It keeps me motivated to do this for you guys. I thank you so much. I hope you all have an epic weekend. And don't forget to tune in next Tuesday. The Fight Dietitian is on the Main Idea podcast.